Greetings, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Huffman, the Quebec-Labrador Foundation's Senior Vice President for Regional and Global Programs, coming to you from our Vermont field office at my home in Waitsfield, in the heart of the Green Mountains. Some of you may be a little surprised not to see our president, Beth Alling, on screen giving these opening remarks. And unfortunately, we still live in the time of COVID, and it turns out Beth's turn to get hit happened yesterday. The good news is that it looks like she only has a mild case, and we trust she'll be back to full strength and in the saddle again soon. For now, she sends her sincere regrets and regards. In Beth's absence, I want to welcome you to season 3 of episode 3 of our webinar series, Voices of QLF. Thank you all for joining us. It's really great to see a strong turnout of many familiar names from QLF's extended family, partners from the Staying Connected initiative, that's the focus of our conversation today, and others as well. We really appreciate all of you making room for this in the midst of everything that's going on at this very busy time of year. I'm really excited to be here today for what I hope will be an interesting, informative, and fun session on a topic that's really near and dear to me, the Staying Connected Initiative, or SCI, the acronym in English. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, SCI is a really innovative partnership that's been underway for about 14 years among US and Canadian non-governmental organizations, government agencies at a variety of different levels, and academic institutions and others, all collaborating to sustain and enhance a connected forest landscape for wildlife and people across borders in northeastern North America. I've been involved in Staying Connected since the initiative got going back in 2008, and it's really been a thrill for me to see how the partnership has grown and its conservation impact has grown over the course of that time. I'm also really pleased that as of earlier this year, QLF became the newest partner in SCI's impressive network, and we'll talk more about that network in a little bit. I've been looking forward to this webinar for a long time, really since soon after joining QLF in my current role nearly a year ago. As we'll dig into, our topic today is directly tied to much of QLF's home region of Atlantic Canada and New England, and to key themes and priorities that are front and center at the ongoing UN Global Biodiversity Summit, or COP15, that's nearing the home stretch in Montreal. And I'll just note that our QLF colleague and Senior Vice President Brett Mitchell is very much in the thick of things there in all kinds of different ways in his role, both with QLF and as Vice Chair of the World Commission on Protected Areas. So we're really fortunate today to have 3 terrific partners from different corners of the Staying Connected initiative with us. I'll introduce each of them briefly now, and then they'll have a chance to say more in a few minutes about their organization, their work, and how they fit into Staying Connected. Panelists, if you would turn on your video and microphones, please. Great. All right. First, I'm really delighted to welcome and introduce one of SCI's newest partners and a new connection for me just in the last couple of months. Ariane Breault, project manager and conservation projects coordinator with Ariane Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent. Ariane Nature is a small, young NGO that's already having really remarkable impact on nature conservation and ecological corridors in southeastern Quebec near the Gaspé Peninsula. She'll tell you more about all of that momentarily. Next, I'm really pleased to introduce and welcome Paula Noel, the New Brunswick Program Director for the Nature Conservancy of Canada, where she's worked since 2006, among many other things that she has her hands in and has impacted. Paula has been helping to lead habitat connectivity work in New Brunswick within the province and across its borders for many years, and she's been a key part of the Canadian contingent in the Staying Connected Initiative partnership over its lifespan. And then last but not least, it's a real pleasure for me to have a chance to welcome and introduce my good friend and longtime colleague, Hilke, who's a conservation planner with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. Jens has really been one of the architects and driving forces within staying connected, both here in Vermont and across the region ever since its formation in 2008. And I've had the real joy of working closely with him over all these years. It's been one of the highlights for me and biggest learning opportunities, frankly, of my whole career in the conservation field. So Jens, welcome. And thank you all for making time to be here to join us for this, to share your insights and your experiences in the midst of everything else that you all are doing. A couple of other quick things I just wanted to mention before we dive in on the substance. As far as potential questions from any of you in the audience, we won't be taking questions live, but if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat, the Zoom chat function, and we'll do our best to respond to them in the coming days. I can't promise exactly how quickly that might happen in the midst of other things, but we'll get back to you. And at the end of the webinar, we'll put up a slide that has all of our contact information, so you'll know where to reach us directly if you want. And then also I wanted to just acknowledge briefly the ECHO Foundation in Montreal, which has just provided QLF with critical funding support for our work, both with the Staying Connected Initiative partnership and also for our maritime stewardship program. We are really deeply grateful for the foundation support and also for the vote of confidence in us and our work that the grants reflect. And we're really excited for the work that lies ahead that the funding will help to enable. All right, so we're now going to dive into the substance about the Staying Connected Initiative. And I want to start by just giving a brief overview of SCI for those of you who aren't already familiar with this cutting edge initiative that, as I say, encompasses much of our home region in QLF's home region in Eastern Canada and New England. I'm going to start by showing a short clip of a longer video that the partnership developed a few years back that's on the SCI website. We'll put the URL up for that later too, but that helps to capture some of the essence of the initiative and shows some visuals that convey what it's all about. You might recognize the narrator's voice, but believe me, that's not why I'm actually showing it to you right now. Hannah, can you roll the video for us, please?
The vast forests of the Northern Appalachian-Acadian region, stretching across two nations, from upstate New York through northern New England to southeastern Quebec and the Canadian Maritimes. These forests are home and habitat to far-ranging mammals who once were free to wander. Today, those free-ranging movements are often blocked by roads and development. The Staying Connected initiative is striving to sustain and restore forest connectivity in this region for wildlife and for people. We're an alliance of nearly 30 conservation and government partners in the United States and Canada, whose work spans more than 80 million acres, 330,000 square kilometers, in 5 states and 3 provinces.
A connected landscape offers a variety of benefits to wildlife and people. It allows wildlife species to adapt to a changing climate, to move their ranges as the climate warms. And whether you enjoy looking at wildlife species or birding or hunting and fishing, you get more of those opportunities with a connected landscape.
As the pressures of development and climate change intensify, the Staying Connected Initiative's collaboration is vital to securing the future of this globally significant forest treasure.
Great, thanks, Hannah. So I wanted to build on that and just spend a moment talking a little bit more about really why does this matter, and to zoom out to a fairly broad perspective, starting globally, and talk about the significance of the Northern Appalachian-Acadian, or what also really is the Wabanaki forest region of this part of northeastern North America. And there are a couple of slides that we have that help to illustrate that. This one is a global image, as you can see, of the distribution in pre-colonial days, so picture several hundred years ago, of the temperate mixed forest type as it used to exist across the globe, excuse me. And you can see towards the left there in red the outline of much, but actually not all of the Northern Appalachian-Acadian region. It includes all of Nova Scotia as well, which isn't included in that outline. So this was a few hundred years ago, and then here's what it looks like today. And you can see how dramatic the loss of that forest type has been, and how the Northern Appalachian-Acadian region is really arguably the last biggest, largely intact area of this forest type in the world. So this is globally significant to try to maintain a connected forest landscape in this area for all the native biodiversity and for all the people who call it home. And then there's one other visual that we wanted to show that this is a sort of conceptualized schematic, but illustrating the projected movement of different taxa of animals over time in response to climate change. And you can see the trends of things moving north in various ways, and how one of the big pathways for that is up the Appalachian Mountain Range in the US into Canada, and how the area circled sort of loosely in red is the region that we're talking about with staying connected, and how it's both a destination for species that are moving up from the south, and also a gateway to further movement on up to the north. So really critical in a time of climate change to sustain the forested connections so that those sorts of movements, range shifts, migrations can happen as climate change continues to unfold. Okay, then just a couple other things I want to touch on briefly before turning it over to our panelists. To tackle this challenge of maintaining and enhancing a connected forest landscape in a region this big and that's this important, staying connected brings together a whole bunch of really vitally important ingredients. And I'll highlight three of them. There are others, but we can get into things more as we go forward. First, SCI uses a multi-pronged approach that blends a combination of both long-established conservation tools and others that may be a little less familiar or less prominent and common. They include things like land protection and land management stewardship, community engagement, land use planning, finding ways to make it easier for wildlife to get safely from one side of a road to another, and also making it safer for the motorists that are driving on those roads for avoiding wildlife collisions, and government policy initiatives at multiple scales. And then all of that is grounded in and informed by the best possible conservation science that we can bring to bear, both field-based science and science based on remote data and tools. Second, staying connected works at a variety of different scales, from very site-specific parcels, even land parcel-specific, and to individual bridges and culverts that may offer pathways to get from one side of the road to another, to individual communities, multiple adjacent communities working together, from state and province-wide efforts to key landscape scale linkages that straddle borders, whether it's state and provincial borders, municipal borders, and international borders. And then ultimately by bringing people together to collaborate across those borders and at the entire binational region. And then third, and it's maybe sort of inherent or implicit in this, is a need to make progress on this, is the need for collective action by a broad partnership. No one organization can accomplish even a piece of all of this really on its own. And so that's where we have to be bringing together players of different sizes, different shapes, different parts of the geographies, from different sectors, government, NGOs, from very large to very small, academic institutions and whatnot. And here's a slide that I just love that captures that, the essence of that quickly, this mosaic of logos of many of the partners. There are now more than 70 actually in staying connected, and the number continues to grow all the time. So that's really crucial of bringing these people together and trying organizations and trying to get everyone working towards common purpose and collective action. Okay, the last thing I'll say quickly is just going back to the regional scale here, I wanted to put this map up. It echoes one that was in the video showing the region that we're talking about, the big forested blocks outlined in green and some smaller ones as well. And then these arrows that show some of the key regional scale forest linkages within the region. We'll come back to some of those as we go forward. Okay. So now enough of listening to me. I'm going to open it up and turn it over to our panelists. We wanted to give each of them a couple of minutes to give a brief introduction to their organization, their work, how they fit within staying connected. And we'll go in an arc across much of SCI's geographic footprint, starting in the east with Paula, going up to the north with Ariane, and then coming down to the west with Jens here in Vermont. So Paula, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, and thanks, Phil, for that, for setting the stage on what is, as you say, a very large and complex network of people and projects, but all working together. Yeah, my name is Paula Noel. I'm the program director for New Brunswick with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. And I am joining you from my home in Wasis, New Brunswick, which is within Wolastoqey territory, part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. I am fortunate to live on the Oromocto River that flows into the Wolastoq, and I think there's a photo there of it in warmer times than we are right now. And for those who aren't familiar with the organization, Nature Conservancy of Canada is Canada's leading private land conservation organization. We're actually celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. So we've been working to conserve biodiversity across the country from coast to coast to coast for 60 years now, and have protected in total helped to protect over 15 million hectares of land across Canada. In my role, I am working in New Brunswick and kind of interacting with pretty much all of the work that happens here. Again, the primary purpose of what we do is protecting private land for biodiversity values. But as part of the program is also stewarding, caring for those lands that we've protected, and increasingly including work on restoring habitats, particularly in some of these areas that are important for connectivity. And also in my role, I take part in the science and partnership programs. And so that is what brings me to my collaboration with the SCI network.
Great, thank you, Paula. So Ariane, will go to you up a little northwest next.
Hi, my name is Ariane Breault. I work for Horizon Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent. I'm glad that I'm talking after you, Paula, because we're connected with the Wolastoq. I'm from the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik-Wasipegug, and I think you're from the Negoktuk First Nation of the same community. So it's where you see the map, it's the little J letter. So I wanted to show this map to you just because I'm sure maybe some of you that are watching right now don't exactly know where Bas-Saint-Laurent is in the Quebec province. So we're located in the 3 border zone that we share with the Maine and New Brunswick. We share borders there. So Horizon Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent is a young organization. We were created in 2016 because no environmental organization was working on private land before us in our region. And because the territory there is 50-50 private public, we had a good need of an organization like Horizon Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent. And we were created with the help of Nature Conservancy Canada. And as you can see behind me, we have a coastal ecosystem as well as interior forest. So Horizon Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent has 2 main axes that we're working on. One of them is managed by my colleague, Michael Jaffré, and he works to protect coastal environment. There is a great variety or quantity of cliffs that are used by migrating birds and different communities of seabirds that are really, really important to protect. And we work with private landowners there to make sure that the high ecological value ecosystems are protected in perpetuity. And also what I'm going to present to you under SCI partnership is my work that I'm coordinating. So I'm a project coordinator for a connectivity project in the interior forest. And so under SCI with different partners across borders, we're making sure that we know well our territory, identify priority sector, and also work with the community to deploy a ecological corridor project there.
Merci, Ariane, and extra thanks to you for doing this in English, which I know is not your native tongue, and I have the utmost respect and admiration for your ability to do it so well. So thank you. I also want to just note that I appreciate both you and Paula acknowledging the territorial indigenous lands that where you both live. I realized I overlooked doing that myself. So where I'm at in Vermont, and Vermont generally is in the territory of the Abenaki or Abenaki people, also part of the Wabanaki larger confederacy. So that applies for both me and for Jens for our work. Okay, Jens, over to you.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks for having me today. It's great to be with you all. I'm Jens Hilke. I'm a conservation planner with Vermont Fish and Wildlife. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department is a state agency. We're responsible for the conservation of all fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the people of Vermont. My chunk of that is doing municipal technical assistance. So while not exactly a home rule state, all the towns in Vermont, 268 towns, are separately responsible for land use planning and development review. And so what happens at the town levels matters a great deal to the overall pattern. So I work with individual municipalities, usually at night, and help them with their land use planning, figuring out where to develop, where not to develop. I also get involved at the state level with conservation science. We have a state conservation design, Vermont conservation design, that helps coordinate our conservation activity. And that's a really big part of my work, is explaining that design. And then I also get involved in road ecology issues and working with the transportation department on road ecology and best places to allow for wildlife movement and climate resilience work. So it's a lot of fun. I'm having a blast. Great.
Thanks, Jens. And as is true for our other two panelists as well, as you can see, Jens has no shortage of things on his plate. So great. Well, thanks for those introductions. And let's move on to the sort of heart of things, the main discussion topics that we wanted to get into. And for starters, we thought it might be hopefully helpful and maybe fun also to try to bring to life a little bit of what connectivity, conservation, and restoration work really looks like. It may be kind of a vague concept to some of you. And so we're going to try to bring it to life through some stories from the field. And so we're going to go one by one with each of us, just offering something from the work on the ground that illustrates what SCI and this kind of work really comes down to. So I think we'll change the order a little bit. And Ariane, do you want to start things off with your work up in Bas-Saint-Laurent?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just a quick comment on what you said, Jens. The image of the wild turkey that you showed us, it's a good example of an animal that now is coming to Bas-Saint-Laurent that we used to not have at all. So with it's echoing also with the image that Phil, you showed in the introduction about the migration because of the consequences of climate change, the species going up north. So that's one of the species that we're seeing now in Bas-Saint-Laurent that is not from our region. So my storytelling today, maybe that I want to share with you, one thing I haven't mentioned, Horizon Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent is quite a small team. So it's 2 employees and a board committee. So I wanted to share a story about connectivity that is about the people around connectivity or behind it or in connectivity. So there's different scales that I think are very, very important. And because for us at Horizon Nature Bas-Saint-Laurent, thinking about connectivity is not about just plants and animals, but it includes us also as part of the biodiversity. So we like to think about our own interactions. So I wanted to show you the different scales of work that someone in the field has to keep in mind in order to have beautiful projects. So I'm not going to show you results of connectivity, but I'm going to tell you the very hard work behind it. So on this map, there's a lot that we can say. You see part of our region. It's maybe a third or a quarter of our region that is represented in the boundaries. So it's our main project right now on connectivity. And you can tell that, well, it's still in the northeastern Appalachian ecoregion. So we share borders internationally with Maine in the United States, and we share borders with New Brunswick, another province of Canada. So we have a partnership that is beyond just what's happening in our region. We have this international or provincial and national collaboration. So I'm part of an expert committee with New Brunswick and CEPAS and Nature Conservancy Canada to really do modeling work to make sure that we know exactly where connectivity or high connectivity points are, which one of these corridors are really to be confirmed on the field, and it's going to cover the 3 borders, so Maine, New Brunswick, and Quebec. So I'm also giving time and resources on this cross-border collaboration, but we're also part of a Quebec initiative that is called Quebec Ecological Corridor. I'm never sure of how to say it in English, but Quebec Ecological Corridor Initiative. We're a group of 10 different organizations working in 11 different regions. So together we come as one united group to have a bigger purpose, bigger impact, and we create this learning and support community where we can exchange tips and knowledge and talk about our struggles and exchange wisdom, really. And we work on a regional project, and you can stay on that slide a little bit, Hannah. I wanted to show you what we do on the field to connect the project with people. So on a regional scale, we work with planners, we work with our First Nations, a council board, we work with elected officials, we work with watershed organizations towards our project of Web of Ecological Corridors, but we mainly work on one specific sector, on road ecology. As you can tell on that image, there's a long highway that is going across Quebec and New Brunswick, the 85, that's turning from a 2-lane highway to a 4-lane highway. And so it's a great deal of fragmentation. So connectivity is stopped or impacted negatively by fragmentation of natural habitat. So a highway is a pretty good example of a perennial impact on connectivity. The Ministry of Transportation in our region constructed or built 31 wildlife passages on that road. So it's a first really in Quebec. We've never really had that much of a density in wildlife passages. But the owners or even some partners are not aware of it necessarily. I think there's a missed opportunities on the communication of the project. So we really took charge of that part, and we took charge of creating bonds and connections with between people, and not just in between natural habitats. So we bring all different ministries, we bring all different partners. We have a regional committee constituted of people from the private forest agencies and forest engineers, mayors, planners, we all have different takes and visions, but we come together and we agree on next steps and on action plans together. And on the local scale, so now on the map, you see a zoom on the 85 that I was telling you about, and every points or lines that you see that are either like black, yellow, or green are the wildlife passages. And you see where it kind of cuts in between two of our major conservation nodes. So we have one in the south and one other on the northeast of the road. And the road really just cuts in between natural habitats, and there's endangered plant species in there. There's very highly important ecological wetland complexes that are cut by the highway. So we really work with mayors on a local scale. We go to their offices, present them to them the project. We talk about connectivity and details, and we don't avoid talking technical with them, but we do it in a fun and accessible way. And we meet with landowners. So that's the last thing I want to say is we're a conservation organization. We can buy properties to protect them. We can do easements. We can do so many different options to protect on perpetuity ecological high ecological value properties. So we meet with landowners. We explain to them where are the wildlife passages, why their property is relevant in this project, what they can do, what they should pay attention to more, what different species are around their property, and we help them achieving their conservation project. So I think if we want ecological projects to be sustainable in the future, we need to make sure that people are also connected to each other.
That's great. Thanks so much, Ariane. Terrific illustration of so many different aspects of what connectivity conservation is all about. And just remarkable the progress that you all are making in such a short amount of time in your area. Okay, next, why don't we go to you, Jens, to talk a little bit about your work here in Vermont.
Yeah, well, let me take you on a journey to rural Vermont. Last night I was in Tunbridge, and I think there is a store. There's a short strip of a few buildings, and if you drive too fast, you'll miss it. And so they have a little town hall, and it's about half a gymnasium. And creaky wood floors, and foldable metal chairs, and pretty cold. And so I showed up there last night, and people began to file in, and I noticed I was among the youngest in the room. And that's pretty typical of the Vermont volunteers. It's overwhelmingly baby boomers. And everyone brought desserts. And so there was this table piled high with brownies and sugar cookies and all sorts of foods. And then we settled down to business and started talking about conservation at the most local level. And it's amazing to hear these dedicated volunteers talk about their communities and their love of that place, and their knowledge of that place far surpasses mine. I look at their place from the maps and see the ecological hotspots, and they just have this deep connection there. They also have power. That's the face of municipal government. Again, it's overwhelmingly senior citizens, but they're a municipal commission, a conservation commission, and they're responsible for advising the rest of the town government on these natural resource issues. And so it's a constantly shifting human landscape. They move, we get new volunteers coming in and other ones going out every few years. And then they're the stalwarts that are there for many years. And they're responsible for helping doing this long-term planning. And so I'm trying to interpret the science from Vermont conservation design. I'm trying to downscale this understanding of ecological connectivity across the whole Northern Appalachians and what that means for Tunbridge. And it's humbling and challenging, but really fun, because there's this back and forth, and they say, well, actually, you missed the spot. The western ridge of Tunbridge is super important for connectivity, and I always see the deer there. And why aren't you, why are you calling that highest priority? And so there's this back and forth. But a lot of the work is about translating the science into language that they can understand and hooking people with the love of place, that shared love of place, and helping these volunteers to navigate the socio-political dynamics in their town, of getting different groups to come together around place as the central point. And that love of the place can get you through the challenges of making changes at the municipal level, whether it's town plan or zoning rewrites. Again, the authority for development review is at that level. And so what that group of volunteers comes up with is the future of that landscape. And so that's just one little tidbit of my world, doing night meetings and popping into these town halls and getting to meet these incredible folks.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, love the way you painted that picture. It took me right to Tunbridge, and the reinforcing the point about the importance of the people factor in so many different ways in this work that Ariane touched on, and how it's, we're looking at this about sustaining the landscape for nature, for wildlife, and for people, recognizing that we're all intertwined in this, but that people have a real responsibility for what happens in the current and the future. So great, thanks. And Paula, over to you to tell us a little bit more about your work in New Brunswick and as it extends across the provincial borders.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll talk a little bit about our kind of most in-depth connectivity work that we're doing on the Chignecto Isthmus. And it'll seem a little bit familiar after hearing Ariane and Jens talk about how they're tackling this, but this people have seen now the maps come up a couple of times showing key linkage areas across the region. And this is one of them. The Chignecto Isthmus is an area that links New Brunswick to Nova Scotia. It actually links Nova Scotia up to the rest of North America. And I would say of all of our priority connectivity regions in this part of the world, this is the most geographically restrained. It's actually physically a narrow area. It's only about 25 kilometers across from shore to shore at the narrowest point right at the border of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And so we've been working here for over a decade, I think close to 15 years, and really prompted by some of the early work that was done by Two Countries, One Forest to identify these pinch points or areas of concern for connectivity across our ecoregion. And so a lot of the work that we did initially was modeling, looking where are the areas that were important for wildlife habitat. We also did some ground truthing of the science, did some camera traps for wildlife, and also road ecology studies that we supported with other groups and academics to ground truth and identify what are actually the most important areas for connectivity within that larger geography. And then again, being primarily a private land conservation group, we certainly have also undertaken land securement at those priority pinch points. And so an example here, mapping shows the purple modeled corridors and some kind of lighter green existing protected areas that were there on two sides. The roads aren't standing out too well, but there is a highway that goes north to south right by the border here. And so what we've been trying to do over time in this, along this highway and other highways that are traveling in the same direction, is create protected lands that are connecting up other, connecting across those highways and out to other natural or protected sites. Happy to report that red property of interest in that map. It's a little dated now. We've successfully protected that as well. And so, so that's been really a successful program, but certainly the rate of development is, you know, is sometimes difficult to keep up with, because this is one of the most rapidly developing areas of the Maritimes. And one of the things, and I should say too, that in recent years, this whole project has gotten a bit of a boost because we, along with various other groups and government agencies that are working on connectivity here, also were able to get this area nominated successfully as a community nominated priority place, which brought with it some funding from the government of Canada to work on connectivity and species at risk in the region. But really one of the unexpected successes that I wanted to share about our work on connectivity in this region came about as almost a bit of an internal joke on how we were going to talk about this when we were first talking about connectivity. And that was where the Moose Sex project came from. Basically, you know, we were talking about some pretty like high level scientific concepts and trying to, you know, what would appeal, what would make this interesting and digestible by the public. And moose were an obvious charismatic megafauna for this area because moose are a wide-ranging mammal, but they're also endangered in mainland Nova Scotia. And so there is a big concern about the ability of populations to migrate in and out of that province and bringing new genetic material into that region, which of course you need some mating for that to happen. And so our communications folks kind of latched onto that and pitched it to media, and it went as viral as we've ever gone. I think that article that's on the screen there is from the BBC. We did get global coverage when that first came out. But what I was really surprised at, talking to the public, talking to reporters, but also just general public and people in this area, was how it really made sense when you started talking about wildlife moving and the need for that to happen. You know, you didn't need a lot of technical knowledge to just get that as a concept, that of course wildlife need to move, and where there are roads and developments and, you know, barriers to that movement, that can't be a good thing for that wildlife in the long run. So it started out as kind of a joke and a funny project, but it led to some really interesting conversations, and also kind of highlighted for us and our partners how having that kind of a catchy campaign can really spark interest and bring in partners maybe from unexpected corners.
Terrific. Thank you, Paula. I love that story. And just that, you know, it so illustrates the importance of communication around all of this, and trying to make what can be kind of wonky, technical, scientific stuff that may not grab the attention of many people. But finding a way to translate that into something that really resonates for people, it seems like that's just a wonderful example. I have to say, just from my own personal experience, also I had the pleasure of going up to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia on a, I don't know, week-long tour last early June, met with Paula and some of her colleagues from NCC, among others, and had a chance to drive through the Chignecto Isthmus and spend a better part of a day meandering my way around. And it was, as is always true, so good to actually get on the ground and get a more firsthand exposure to the situation there, and just to really appreciate the challenges of trying to sustain forested connections on that very narrow land bridge. That's a land bridge not only for wildlife like moose and bear and other species that move long distances and need to, but also for people. And so, you know, there's a huge amount of that's the land connection to Nova Scotia to and from. So anyway, really important work. Thank you for filling us in a little bit and for what you're doing up there. over there, I guess. All right, let's shift gears. As I think we probably sensed in setting all of this up, there was going to be way more to talk about than there's going to be time for. So, but we'll dive in on a couple of other aspects in the next few minutes. Try to move through a few things briefly. I wonder if I wanted to just spend a minute talking about sort of what really distinguishes SCI as a partnership and an initiative, as a conservation initiative, from other efforts. And, you know, from your vantage points, if there are one or two things that really jump out of what makes it unusual and special, how it adds value to your organization's efforts. And I think maybe we'll just open it up if, you know, one or another of you wants to take the lead and, you know, maybe just in a minute or so, share any thoughts. Jens.
Yeah, I really want to jump up and down about the multi-pronged approach from Staying Connected. And, you know, it's not enough for transportation agencies to make bridges that will accommodate wildlife. That doesn't allow for wildlife connectivity in perpetuity. It's not enough for us to conserve land and land protection efforts, little islands of habitat in a sea of development. That's great, but it's not enough. It's not enough if Tunbridge alone does some awesome land use plan. What matters most in this day and age, in my opinion, is the coordination between those pieces, so that the land protection and the land use planning and the road barrier mitigation all work together in concert to preserve these corridors in perpetuity. So that multi-pronged approach, the coordination between the different groups that are working on projects, in my opinion, is the most important part of Staying Connected. Wondering what other folks' thoughts are on that.
Paula,
I couldn't agree more with what you've said, Jens. I think, well, I'm a recent partner of SCI. I've been working for 1.5 years only also. So both as like a young conservationist and biologist in a young organization, my take on it might be from a different perspective. But I think the strength of SCI is the number and like the power that we can get from uniting together and the greater context that it gives us and the purpose and the political outcomes that we can get together from that exposure, that we benefit from each other. Like today, we all have an opportunity to talk to different partners, different people that I might not be able to interact with usually. So I think for me, that would be, yeah, the power of number of different partners.
Great, merci. Paula?
Well, yeah, and I was going to add just another aspect that I found really powerful of SCI is by bringing together all of these groups and agencies across this ecoregion, and then that has become a really powerful tool to get attention on connectivity and biodiversity conservation at a much higher political level than I think any of us could, working on our own in our own jurisdictions. And so one of the great successes that I've seen through the Staying Connected initiative was successfully getting a resolution through the New England Governors, Eastern Canadian Premiers Coalition group, however you call them. So at that level, though, the governors and the premiers agreed to make this a priority, which then gave government staff and all of those states and provinces the mandate to really make this a focus of their work.
Terrific, thanks. I might add one other thought. I think there are a number of other things that we could all touch on, but I'll add one more, which links into some of what you all have said, which is the way in which SCI operates at multiple scales. And going back to my introduction of like from the individual parcel scale all the way up to the binational scale and across this giant region that encompasses, more than 80 million acres or 300 and I can't remember what the translation is to hectares. It's a huge, huge area. And I love one of our partners coined a term back, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. Yeah, it's helped me out, but of the cosmic zoom that SCI reflects. I love that, of just, the zooming in down to the very granular and way out to the big picture. And you can keep going out to the global, really, as I did earlier, I guess. And the way in which all those different scales tie in, and it helps to make the work or an individual landowners or individual communities' place in this bigger region matter and make sense, and like how they fit into the bigger picture, and how what's happening at the bigger picture affects and ties in with individuals. So all right, great. Well, thanks for your thoughts on all of that. So I think we've got about 10 minutes to go, and we wanted to really pull back a little bit from just SCI, but maybe we can do a little bit of blending here of one of the topics on SCI that we were still hoping to get to, which is around opportunities, particularly in this moment to accelerate and advance this work. But I guess as we go into this sort of last big discussion topic, I would just be interested in thoughts that any of you have in this moment where we're so, I think those of us who care about this sort of thing and are immersed in one way or another in our work, in our communities as global citizens, are so concerned about the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis and the planetary health crisis, all of these things. But there's attention being paid. There was the COP27 in Egypt last month as the latest step forward on a global effort to try to tackle climate change. COP15 is happening right now in Montreal. Hugely important, lots of great things happening, hopefulness that something really substantial is going to come out before that wraps up early next week. I guess I'm wondering, blending that with also where things are at with connectivity work within our region here, what you all see that gives you hope for the future, and how does conservation play a role in offering hope and promise for the future, both of this region and more globally? And open it up. Anybody want to take first crack?
We can go around backwards this time, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a big question. But I think what we are hearing from many groups at the Nature COP that's happening is that we need to involve everyone in these solutions to these enormous problems. Climate change and biodiversity loss needs to be a whole of society approach to find solutions. And so the traditional way of doing conservation is not enough. And I think what the SCI model demonstrates is that you can bring more people, less traditional people, to the table and engage them and involve them in finding solutions, not just on, what we think of as traditional conserved lands, but on how the whole matrix of the landscape is managed in a way that protects connectivity and biodiversity.
Thanks, Paula. Ariane, Jens, you want to follow on?
Yeah, I really agree with that the opportunity to bring in more people and of different viewpoints. I'll also add, on the U.S. side, there's unprecedented funding, the likes of which I've never seen before. And so I feel like I'm at this moment in my career, this pivotal moment where there's opportunities to fund projects that we've never dreamed of. Between the infrastructure bill, the ARPA, the American Resource Protection Act, the potential for RAWA, the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, there's a lot of money focused on these issues. There's a lot of attention focused. And I just feel like I have this opportunity right now that I might never get again, and I've never seen before. And so I'm so excited and optimistic for the future, not just because of that funding, but because we have the funding and the increasingly more people involved.
Thanks, Jens. Ariane, would you like to?
Yeah, well, I have the word of the end, probably. It's a big pressure, but
Almost.
yeah. I think so many different things. I think we need to nurture critical thinking because environmental issues are gaining so much popularity across all systems. And I think we still need to be critical, humble, and transparent. The younger generations also are asking for transparency a lot, I think, to heal the confidence or the trust that we have towards our institution. But I think, yeah, our ability to work together is a great opportunity, and it needs to be taken. And we need to work across borders, like we said, and across nations. I think First Nation have been telling us for so long and are still telling us that we can do things differently. We need to have a resilient mindset to be able to view and clear some headspace and time to adapt to new practices or frame. And I think what is giving me hope, well, not only I have to tell you, well, Quebec is hosting, Canada is hosting COP15 right now. So as a good host, they are very ambitious at the moment, and they just announced that we got $650 million towards creating and expanding protected habitats. We see a lot of articles from our organizations and from the Quebec initiatives on ecological corridors, open letters, and formal requests on to different ministries. So that's giving me hope, but also community-rooted initiatives and bottom-up initiatives about conservation are really what's giving me a lot of hope lately. Maybe if I have time, I'll just finish on a nice exchange that I had at the Bend Council here with the Wolastoqiyik First Nation. We were exchanging on different projects and on connectivity. And Bruno Thériault, the Director of Natural Resources and Territory Department, told me, you know, Ariane, under Indigenous beliefs, it's never too late, basically. So if you feel that you're not doing things properly, it's not too late. If you feel that you should take a turn, it's not too late. Just take a quick break and think about it a little bit more. And I thought it was so simple, but so true at the same time. It's never too late.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I love that. What a great note to weave in. And yeah, thanks to all three of you for that. I guess, you know, I'll offer a couple of quick thoughts of my own on this, which really, I think, intertwine with what you all have said in different ways. As I was thinking ahead on this, I think that what gives me hope, among a lot of other things, are the growing recognition, you know, both close to home and what seems really around the world, of the fundamental interdependence of humanity with our environment. And that's something that I think humanity knew a long time ago, all across humanity. It was known, and it's been lost among many, not by no means all, but among many. And I think there's a sort of reawakening of that's happening on a more pervasive basis. That gives me hope. And especially you link it with, well, it's never too late. And then I think another long overdue awakening that a couple of you touched on is the imperative of environmental justice. And the one manifestation of that, among many that we're seeing here in the US, in Canada, I think elsewhere, is the growing attention to and really centering of Indigenous knowledge and cultures and traditions and practices in the conservation world. It sounds like the meeting you were just at, Ariane, is a great example of the coming together and hopefully the blending of the best with the Indigenous perspective and culture and history everything has with a Western approach as well. And then the third that one or more of you touched on is the broader awareness and understanding and passion for addressing the climate and the biodiversity and the planetary health crises among the rising generations. And that's something that I think, you know, the QLF has a long tradition of helping to grow the next generation of conservation leaders. We see them both among people within our team here and who have passed through here in years past, but all around, I think all of us, right, that there's so much more awareness on these sorts of issues and commitment, attention, passion to just we have to find a better way. So all of that gives me hope as well. All right, well, we're just about at time, so I want to wind things down. I wish we could keep going for another hour or so. I think or longer, we wouldn't have any lack of things to talk about. But to wrap it up, in closing, on behalf of all of us at QLF, well, actually, sorry, fast forwarding too quickly here. Before wrapping up, if any of you who are tuning in now live or in the watching the recording of this later want more information on SCI, please visit the partnership's website. It's newly revamped, really terrific. So you can see the URL at the bottom of the screen here. And if you have any questions or thoughts, suggestions, ideas for any of the four of us, please reach out. You may want to just do a screenshot of this, the screen right now to capture our emails, or just touch base with me and I can put you in touch with the others. And then, so to close out, I want to just offer my heartfelt thanks, and on behalf of all of us here at QLF, great appreciation to the three of you, Ariane, Paula, and Jens, for joining us, for making this work in the midst of everything. Your individual vision and energy and work and accomplishments and the work, everything that you're doing individually and collectively on behalf of connectivity conservation through cross-border partnerships and collaborative efforts is really remarkable and impactful. So our hats are off to the three of you, and grateful. I personally am deeply grateful to have a chance to work with each of you among everyone else in the Staying Connected partnership. And look forward to continuing that in the years ahead. Next, I want to extend a sincere thanks to our QLF team that helped to put this together, our webinar producer, Bill Steelman, who's sort of the man behind the scenes, who helps to orchestrate it all. Our webinar host, Hannah Moore, in Nova Scotia. I should say Bill is in Ipswich, or close to Ipswich, where the mothership is for QLF. Hannah's in Nova Scotia in Halifax. And then our Zoom co-host, Krista Grant, who's in Scotland. So illustrating a little bit of the global scope of QLF. And then I wanted to do one final acknowledgement. And Hannah, I wonder if you would be willing to unmute your audio and come on screen for just a sec. So for those of you who haven't ever had a chance to see and meet Hannah, here she is. And who has been in charge of QLF Canada's communications and has helped us out in so many different ways over the last couple of years. Sadly for us, this is Hannah's last day, for now at least, with QLF, and it marks the closure of one great chapter for her, but the beginning of a new and really exciting one as she embarks on some overseas travels that we're all going to be jealous of as she heads to New Zealand for a few months, and then she'll be soon pursuing graduate studies in agricultural sustainability in Quebec. So she fortunately won't be going too far away. And I want to just offer our deep appreciation to you on behalf of our president, Beth Alling, and from all of us at QLF, Hannah, for your terrific work, your many contributions and commitment to this organization. We will miss you big time. And we know you're going to be out there, and hope that maybe you'll come back to us someday, or that we may come get you to reel you bayou in. Anyway, it's been a real pleasure, and you've had a terrific impact on this organization. Thank you. To all of you out there who are watching this now or on the recording, thanks again for joining us. I hope it's been a worthwhile hour for you, and stay tuned for news on our next episode of season 3. So this will be episode 4 that will be coming live on Thursday, February 16th. We'll be getting news out about that in a month or so. And for now, all the best to all of you for a happy and peaceful holiday season, and for great promise in the new year. Thanks very much.